Jim Allister. He's the TUV leader and he's our election live call today. The election just 4 weeks away. You can put your questions to each of the main party leaders between now and then. They'll all be live on Talkback, but today it is the turn of the TUV leader, Jim Allister. Get your questions in for him on 08459 555 678. And Jim Allister joins us now from our Coleraine studio. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Good to have you with us today.
Thank you.
A couple of things that we're going to do during the next 25 minutes. You'll be taking the Talkback test later on, and you'll also be hearing what it will take for people to vote for you, the people that our reporter Rosie Billingham's been speaking to today. But to start with, Jim Allister, you've got a minute to tell us why people should vote for you.
Well, I would like to begin by, of course, offering condolences to the Kerr family in this heinous murder, which has been conducted by some branch of the IRA. We have seen a lot of hypocrisy flow from that, in that Sinn Féin's, whose own IRA murdered so many officers, and those murders are no different, no better, no worse. They were equally vile and dastardly. And yet those very people sit at the heart of our government because of a system constructed to reward them for their terrorism. And that's my fear for the future, that having rewarded terrorism by constructing a system to guarantee IRA Sinn Féin a place in perpetuity in government, we encourage more terrorism such as we saw on Saturday. And unless and until we change that system and reroute it in the basics of democracy, the right to have an opposition, the right to vote a party out of government, the very things the people of the Irish Republic have done, the very thing the people of Scotland and Wales will do on the 5th of May perhaps, yet we are denied that right. That is wrong. That has to change, and unless until it does, we will never create a Stormont which delivers. And I want a Stormont that works. I don't want one that's in constant gridlock and deadlock and mired in inability to move on education, which sits back as a spectator while unemployment, as with this Assembly, has risen by 150%. I want to see working government, but we're never going to get working government so long as we kick out of place the cornerstones of democracy, the right to have an opposition, the right to vote a party out of government, and my party is the party that is the real alternative, proffering those views and articulating that out. But let's be very clear. I'm very happy to talk to you about the financial policy. We in this country do not raise enough taxation in Northern Ireland to pay our own way, sadly. And therefore we are very dependent on the block grant. And we are entitled to that as part of the United Kingdom. I utterly abhor the fact that there are some politicians who squander that block grant on useless, needless expenditure like the North-South bodies, like 60 million to the GAA, when our health service is going short. I equally deplore the fact that there's some wanted to chase a rainbow about corporation tax, which at a stroke will reduce the block grant by £300 million, which will hit frontline services. So I'm very clear that the Barnett formula, which does need reform to better reflect socio-economic need in Northern Ireland, is something we shouldn't wish away in terms of settling our future financial dependence as part of the United Kingdom, which is our entitlement. You will read in our manifesto exactly where we stand, and we are very strong supporters of the health service. We are appalled at the political football it has been turned into by the DUP and Sinn Féin for the sake of trying to score points off political opponents, and we are appalled that it has been underfunded while other things far less deserving have had money lavished upon them, like the GAA and the 60 million. So I want to see a health service that works. I want to see it available to all, and I want to see it improved at the point of delivery for patients. And I think it is quite wrong that on parity of expenditure we have now fallen under devolution behind the level in GB, and that needs to be restored because we are citizens of the United Kingdom entitled to the same rights and privileges and the same benefits that go with that.
So was Michael McGimpsey right when he said he wasn't getting his fair share?
It sounds very much to me like Michael McGimpsey was put upon by the DUP Sinn Féin coalition in order to make life difficult so that they could paint him in a bad light. I carry no torch for Michael McGimpsey, but I recognise politicking when I see it, and I recognise an underfunded, such as I've already referred to in respect of this. And one could go on with an endless list in respect of waste by this executive. 10 million wasted on local government reform that never happened. 4 million wasted on the Maze site, never happened. 10 million on ANISA, which doesn't exist. 400 million to useless north-south bodies. The list is endless. But when it comes to our health service, shortage, increasing waiting lists. All of that are gross failures, and they are gross failures of this executive.
Okay, got others in the queue. Just to pick up, though, on something you said there, Jim Allister, you said that you thought Michael McGimpsey had been put upon by the DUP and others. You're talking in your election website about not endangering unionist seats because by transferring across the unionist family, the unionist vote will be maximised. So would you be encouraging TUV voters to vote Ulster Unionist second?
No, I'm very clear that, of course, I want people to vote TUV as the real alternative in this election to try and restore the basics of democracy. But I'm equally clear that my primary enemy in all of this is IRA Sinn Féin. And therefore, I want to maximise the unionist vote. And the best way of doing that is coming out and voting TUV and then voting for the other unionists on the ballot paper, whoever they might be, in the order of preference. I'm not here to dictate to people what that preference should be.
Okay.
I'm simply saying prefer unionists over Republicans, because we've seen enough republicanism and enough failure to tame it in this province under the DUP Sinn Féin coalition. But we are equally clear that part of the unity of the United Kingdom is its fiscal unity. And if it's right, and it is, to reduce corporation tax, then it should be reduced across the whole UK. But of course, for some, it is but a political tool to further harmonise the island of Ireland. And those who, I listened to Barbara de Bruyn for 5 years in the European Parliament urging increase in corporation tax. Corporations weren't being taxed enough, she constantly told us. Now, because it happens to suit the political agenda of the Belfast Agreement, suddenly it's a desired panacea. It's no panacea.
Although
but
David
what
Vance
we
does describe an admission from this lousy government that UK membership of the EU prevents us from doing that which may be right for our regions.
And membership of the EU is a lousy concept because it restricts us in doing all sorts of things. And TUV is very clear that the United Kingdom would be better off out than in the EU, because it cost us, even in financial terms, something approaching £5 billion a year just to belong to the club, which then puts all these rules upon us. So, do not try to create mischief where there is none. We are quite clear corporation tax nationally should be reduced to encourage growth and to get a stable economy, but we do not favour a disparity in taxation levels across the UK, because that attacks the fundamental of the unity of the UK and also attacks the fundamental dependency and need that we have for the block grant.
I've got several other callers. Stephen's on the line with a question for Jim Allister. Hello, Stephen.
How are you doing, Wendy?
I'm fine, thanks. You're through to Jim Allister.
The question is just simply that Mr. Allister's mentioned the GAA twice in what he perceives as waste of money that's going out to the other bodies. But he refused to mention the fact that rugby is getting some money and also soccer. So is it just the GAA that he has a problem with?
No, I mentioned that because it is one of the most striking features that when you're underfunding your health service, you're overfunding aspects of sport. And yes, it's quite clear that within that financial package for sport, 60 million, no, not in the 4-year legal term that guarantees delivery in a budget, is going to football when they only asked for 30. And that seems to be an overspend or maybe an overpromise, which probably never intends to be met, because, as I say, most of that expenditure is in years 5 and 6 when there is no budgetary requirement to pay it. But whether it's overfunding football with 60 million when they didn't ask for 60 million, or 60 million to the GAA, when we have hospital waiting lists of 55,000 people waiting more than 9 weeks, when we have basic drugs which people can get in the rest of the UK and can't get here, when we have a cancer unit which isn't being opened because of lack of funding, then there's something seriously wrong with our priorities and the priorities of Stormont if they think in those circumstances it's more important to prioritise sports stadia so that spectators could have better facilities than to prioritise those who depend upon and use our hospitals and our schools.
Okay, Billy's on the line with a question for Jim Allister. Hello, Billy.
Hello, Mr. Allister.
Yes, hello, Billy.
Mr. Allister, I would just like to ask you, during the last coal spell, now I hope I can put this to you that you can understand.
Yes.
I'm a pensioner, my wife's a pensioner, but my wife still works and doesn't receive her pension. Now,
Yes.
during that last coal spell, we were every bit as cold as every other pensioner in Northern Ireland. Extra halfpenny towards our heating allowance, other than the standard I got, which was the 250. But yet there was other pensioners getting money because of the coal spill. I can't understand. I mean, I was just as cold as what they were.
Yeah.
How does it work?
I think there are issues which have not been addressed about means testing and the manner in which means testing has been applied to a variety of social benefits. Not just that, but when it comes, for example, to elderly people who suddenly and maybe unexpectedly require care, suddenly that those that have been frugal and wise and put by some money during their lives, or those who have to raid all of that, spend all of that, and they look at others and who were quite the very opposite in their lifestyle and who have everything provided for them. I understand that we live in a community where there is imbalance and disparity.
Can you do anything to change that?
Well, I think a lot of that is, of course, national in terms of the welfare system. I think we can tweak at that, but I think it would be raising false expectations to say that Stormont itself can do a great deal in respect of that in regard to national welfare arrangements, but such as can be done certainly should be done, because I do feel very much for those who were prudent, who worked hard, who went out to work when they weren't maybe able to work because that was their work ethic, who put by what they could instead of squandering their money on other things, and now find themselves that because they have a few pound in the bank that they are put upon in this manner and are expected to pay the exorbitant prices which are attached to many of these basic services. Okay. And even when you look at the rates bills which have hit our doormats this week, you can see that everything is rising and everything, of course, is rising except income of many people.
Billy, do you think politicians can be any help for you?
Well, I would like to think so, but still the point I would like to make is that the Assembly did pay out an allowance. So if the Assembly done that for some, why did they not do it for us?
Yes, it could have been done universally. The Assembly under DSD could have made that payment universal. Okay. They chose to means test it, and in that I think they threw up the disparity and the unfairness that you have suffered. So that's something that lies at the door of DSD and the executive.
Billy, thanks for your call. I'm going to have to move on because we've got a queue building up here. Lots of calls coming in, so we'll try to keep the questions and answers fairly brief if we could. Pat has been waiting for some time from Lisnaskey. Hello, Pat.
Thank you, Wendy. Mr. Allister, I just want to ask you, which would you prefer, a direct British rule or a continuation of Robinson and McGuinness doing the bookkeeping?
I want to see democracy that works. Therefore, I want you as an elector to be able to elect those that you wish to govern, vote out those you don't wish to govern, and not be saddled with the system that no matter who you vote for,